At this week's town hall, Donald Trump once again reiterated the position in response to questions, in this case from a voter in the audience asking, will you release your tax returns the way that basically every candidate does at some point? I think it's a slightly odd tradition, but I understand why they do it. And it seems like he would uphold that since he has mocked candidates in the past, as you're going to see in a second.
But there are reasons with Donald Trump that supersede the reasons
that make it more important.
That make it more important.
Yes.
And there's also the charitable giving part.
There's that too, yes.
And that is a huge part of this.
Yeah.
Is that he touts himself as being the wealthiest this, the wealthiest that, and people don't think he gives money to charity.
Yeah.
And that's why people some people doubt he's worth as much as he's worth, which, it bears looking into as well. But it's the charity stuff that people want to see somebody who's this wealthy who doesn't give it away at all.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason behind wanting
Yeah, so, we would like to see it. He has an excuse for why he's not going to release it. This is from a previous debate, but it's the same general argument, and here is him explaining why he won't release the returns.
I will say this. Mitt Romney looked like a fool when he delayed and delayed and delayed, and Harry Reid baited him so beautifully. And Mitt Romney didn't file his return until September 21st of 2012, about a month and a half before the election. And it cost him big league. As far as my return, I want to file it, except for many years, I've been audited every year. 12 years or something like that. Every year they audit me, audit me, audit me. Nobody gets audited. I have friends that are very wealthy people. They never get audited. I get audited every year. I will absolutely give my return, but I'm being audited now for 2 or 3 years, so I can't do it until the audit is finished, obviously, and I think people would understand that.
He's hoping that people will understand that, and in the most recent town hall, he says that he was going to release a letter explaining that he was being audited to flesh things out. We have a little bit of information.
He promised that to John Dickerson as well of CBS News,
really?
that he would do that. Yeah.
Yes, and so some letter has come out. We have a section from it. IRS examinations of Trump's tax returns from 2002 to 2008 have been closed administratively, according to Trump's lawyers, without assessment or payment. Now, that means that examination of those returns is finished. So you would assume, well, then can't we get those 6 years of returns? Well, no, he's got a clever trick for that, too. The lawyer said Trump's recent tax returns, the ones that the IRS is still auditing, are just extensions of the older returns for a decade plus, because they include items that are attributable to continuing transactions or activities that were also reported on returns from 2008 and earlier. In this sense, the pending examinations are continuous of prior closed examinations. And so isn't that clever? Even though we could theoretically release the earlier ones, there's just extensions now, and so it's all tied up. And it might seem complicated, but it's not complicated, because whether they're being audited or not means dick. It means absolutely nothing. There is nothing stopping him from releasing returns as they're being audited. That is simply a myth that he has manufactured.
Well, right, there's nothing stopping him except him,
Except him,
yeah.
Yes.
Also, the weird thing about this letter was dated, I don't know, 5th of March, 7th of March.
I didn't see the date, actually.
Why
That's
did they wait so long to release the letter?
Maybe they didn't want to bring it back up again. Maybe they'd gone several weeks with nobody mentioning the returns, and they thought, oh, well, maybe if nobody cares.
Well, I mean, possibly,
Yeah.
But he's paying this lawyer bigly, I'm guessing.
Big league,
to get him out of this.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he runs the risk of looking like a fool if he delays and delays and delays.
Well, and guess how much this matters to the people that support Donald Trump?
Probably not at all. But again, look, we bring up a lot of things, or I bring up a lot of things, especially on Twitter, of things that could hurt him. And very often the response will be that people give the very reasonable response. Trump supporters aren't going to be affected by it, which is 100% true. But right now, I'm not concerned about taking away Trump supporters. They're in the cult of personality. They've bowed down to the great leader. They're not going to change. I don't care about them. He needs to win a general election to become president.
Yeah.
And he has become increasingly unpopular amongst regular people who are not voting in the Republican primary.
But as somebody who wants Bernie
him.
Sanders, you're somebody who wants Bernie Sanders to be president, right? So don't you want Donald Trump to be the nominee?
Right now, early on, I didn't. I thought that him having the continuation of the rallies, the large crowds and everything, I thought that it could be uniquely damaging to American democracy, basically. And so I didn't want to experience it, even
like
if
an
I thought...
altruistic way. You say, well, I don't want to put the country through the ugliness of
Yes,
this
I thought
campaign.
that it could have lingering damage.
That's a noble
Which
reason.
I still have that concern. Now, honestly, although I used to think that he's a good debater in terms of... I don't think he's a good debater, but he always wins debates, so I guess he's a good debater. And a good campaigner. Nobody can make much stick to him. I used to be a little bit scared of him. But now, in terms of when you look at his favorability ratings amongst certain key general election groups, I think his chances have gone down lower and lower and lower.
So
now I kind of do want to
John. I mean, Donald Trump has not faced Black Americans or working Americans or lower middle class Americans, or that's not true because he has faced a number of those. But when you're talking about the Union Americans, the people that are out there that are not voting in Republican primaries, and he has to face that audience, no matter whether it's Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren or Kirsten Gillibrand, whoever the names of the people that might run for president one day, they don't have a chance. Trump doesn't have a chance with those groups. And then,
increasingly agreeing.
I haven't even said Latin Americans.
Yeah.
Hispanic Americans.
No, but he says that he does great amongst them.
They love
Trump
him.
would be
They
great
love
for them.
him. They love him. The Mexicans
I used to
him.
be more scared, and it's not impossible for things to turn around, and people love to look at the general election matchups that have been coming out for the past few months and say that they mean nothing, and they don't mean everything. But they mean a lot more in the beginning of April than they did in the beginning of February.
If your man,
and they're
if
sticking
your guy,
more and more.
If your guy gets the nomination, right? Bernie Sanders gets the nomination, and you are told, somebody comes up, whispers in your ear, and says, "Hey, look, that little bird that landed on him in Seattle or Portland comes up and whispers in your ear and says, hey, John, if John Kasich gets the nomination, he's going to beat Bernie Sanders."
I think he'd have a much better chance.
If Donald, no, listen, let me finish.
Okay.
The bird's not telling you to shut up now for a second. So he says, John Kasich is going to beat your man. Donald Trump is going to run an ugly campaign. It's ugly for America. You're going to see some of the ugly elements of this country. Not a chance he wins. Bernie Sanders, the next president. What do you pick?
Well, and I would pick him running against Donald Trump.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that's the choice you're giving.
Yeah.
So when you see bad
But
things
my
happen to
opinion is
Donald Trump,
changing as his numbers have been changing.
right?
That's what I've been
and
trying
that's
to say.
fair. I know. I understand. You evolve, and there was a reason for a while, I think, for Democrats, whether you support Secretary Clinton or Senator Sanders, to think, this guy's, he could maybe beat our candidate. But when you go down that line of people that he hasn't faced in the electorate, it's going to be tough.
It's bad for him. Yeah. And look, honestly, when you look at all these polls and when you think about appealing to those groups, John Kasich seems like the scariest person in terms of chances to win.
Which he has none right now.
Which he has none now, unfortunately, because he has to get the nomination first. But I think that one of the reasons I have a little bit of hesitance is a bias that I had to look and identify, and it was that I can't wait for Trump to lose and be a loser, and so I want to experience it soon rather than later.
There was a lot of Republicans who felt that way about Marco Rubio.
Yeah.
People that I spoke to out there.
They wanted to see him a loser?
They wanted to see him lose because they felt like he almost was entitled to the presidency. And these are people who presumably...
Jeb Bush felt that.
Well, in a way he did, but in a more justifiable way. I mean, Jeb Bush was a successful governor. We'll say what you want about him. He's a successful governor. He's been in the public eye for quite a while. He's been around. He's a little more substantive than his brother was. But forgetting the compliments to Jeb Bush, they thought that Marco Rubio was a Johnny-come-lately who thought he was entitled to this thing. And they all think they're entitled to it. They all think they should win it. But there was that feeling that when they were so happy to see him lose.
Yeah.
At his last rally, there was a Cruz person there. This was the night he dropped out, and I was in Miami, and it was at the Florida International University, and there was a guy there with a Cruz shirt on. I said, "What are you doing here?" Afterwards, I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I just came to see Marco drop out." He said, "I know my guy's not going to be president, but I just came to see him drop out." And so there's that feeling. So I know what you're talking about with Donald Trump.
Yeah, and look, so hopefully they'll continue to repeat it. I don't know why Chris Matthews didn't bring it up. Chris Matthews, I assume, knows this, that he can release it. It might not damage him amongst Trump supporters. It might not even damage him amongst most people, although I think the charitable donations would be interesting. For me, the reason I want to see it is I am 100% certain that he is worth, at bare minimum, 40% less than he says that he is. Because I know from previous explanations he's given that he rates his personal brand at worth $2.2 billion. And
do you think
that's not going to be on his tax return?
Serious question here. Do you think that's an Achilles heel within his own crowd? Do you think if they heard
If he
that
wasn't as rich?
if he wasn't as rich as he is, do you think some of his supporters at that point would drop? They don't care about charitable donations. They don't care about even releasing them. But
Yeah.
if they're released and you find out he's not worth $9 billion, he's worth $2.5 billion.
Maybe. I think that
I think that's possible.
It probably wouldn't, but if anything will, it would be that, or a tape comes out and he actually is in love with Muslims around the world. Like
Right.
those are the two things that could hurt him.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to see it the most is less about it damaging him and more about that I know that it is his personal weakness, is a fear that he will be seen as not as rich and
Yeah.
successful. We've said many times, someone who was in the Comedy Central roast of him said, the people that we roast always have one or two things that are off limits. And for him, it wasn't his hair, it wasn't his physical appearance, it wasn't his family. It was, you cannot joke that I am not worth as much as I say I am. Right. And so I just want to see it shown to the whole world.